The Royal Navy's Minelayers, a tale of strategy and courage. Diary entry, January 12, 1940. HMS Halcyon, somewhere off the coast of the English Channel. The cold wind cut through my uniform as I stood on the deck of HMS Halcyon, watching the choppy waters of the English Channel stretch out before us. Our mission that day was crucial. We were to lay a minefield in the heart of the channel, a vital waterway for enemy ships attempting to cross between France and Britain. I remember thinking about the small size of our ship. Only 950 tons of metal, yet it carried the weight of an entire defensive strategy. We weren't armed for full combat, but we had our role to play in the grand scheme of things. If we could keep the enemy at bay, it would buy Britain precious time. As the mines were lowered into the water, I felt the weight of history. Each one was like a ticking time bomb for anyone who dared to enter. Our commander, Lieutenant Commander Richards, had briefed us that morning. "We're not just laying mines," he said. "We're laying the groundwork for Britain's survival." This narrative is sponsored by Polly Speaks For You. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been passionate about empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You isn't just a tool. It's a bridge for people to communicate and interact with the world in a meaningful way. By blending historical storytelling with cutting-edge tech, the creator showcases how powerful a voice can be, whether telling your own story or preserving history. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button and help this channel grow. Now back to the story. Reminiscence. HMS Kingfisher, Mediterranean Sea, 1941. The Mediterranean was a different beast altogether. The skies were clear, but the tension in the air was palpable. I had just been assigned to HMS Kingfisher, a sister ship to the Halcyon, but much like the rest of the crew, I had quickly come to understand the importance of our mission. Unlike the English Channel, which was cold and murky, the Mediterranean was warm and bright, a different sort of battlefield. We were tasked with laying mines around the heavily fortified Italian ports. The plan was to create a maze of hidden dangers that would slow down Axis naval operations and keep their ships from moving freely. It was an audacious strategy, and we knew it could turn the tide of the war if successful. One particular evening stands out. The night was so dark we couldn't even see our hands in front of our faces. The hum of the engines and the shuffling of boots on the deck were the only sounds. As I stood on watch, I thought about the mines we had just released into the water, silently drifting toward their targets. Would the enemy fall into our trap? We didn't have to wait long. A few days later, a report came through. An Italian destroyer had struck one of our mines. The ship was heavily damaged, and though the Italians managed to limp back to port, it was a victory for us. Admiralty Report, HMS Halcyon, February 22, 1940. Royal Navy Admiralty Official Report. Subject: Successful laying of minefield in the English Channel. The operation conducted by HMS Halcyon today was a remarkable success. The ship deployed 150 mines in a line just off the French coast. Weather conditions were harsh, but the crew executed the operation with precision, and no mines were lost during deployment. It is important to note that no enemy vessels were encountered during the operation, although intelligence reports indicate that German naval units are likely aware of our activities. The minefield is expected to disrupt enemy shipping and limit access to vital French ports for the foreseeable future. Diary entry, HMS Halcyon, April 12, 1941. It's been months since we set out to lay our first minefield in the channel, but the work hasn't stopped. Each day brings a new set of challenges. Today, I was on deck when we spotted a German U-boat just off our starboard. There was no time to react, and our captain ordered a sharp turn to avoid it. My heart raced as we narrowly escaped. It was a reminder that the work we were doing wasn't without risk. As we continue to lay mines, I can't help but think of the ones we've already deployed. Each field we create is like a giant web that traps the enemy in its path. We may not see the immediate results, but I trust that somewhere, someone will run afoul of one of our carefully placed mines. I just hope it's not us. Reminiscence. The conversion of a merchant ship. There's one story I'll never forget. It was early in the war, before the Royal Navy had its fleet of purpose-built mine layers. They converted a number of merchant vessels to lay mines, including an old freighter named SS Hermes. I was assigned to oversee the conversion of this ship, and while we had no illusions about the ship's age, it was still a daunting task. We had to retrofit the entire cargo hold to carry mines, which involved a great deal of work. It wasn't the sleekest vessel, but it had heart. When we finally took it out for a test run, the crew had a collective sigh of relief. The Hermes wasn't glamorous, but it got the job done. She laid her first minefield near the French coast with minimal incident, and it wasn't long before the ship became one of the unsung heroes of the fleet. Diary entry: August 7th, 1943. HMS Halcyon, Mediterranean Sea. The heat is unbearable today. The Mediterranean sun beats down on us, but we've got work to do. We're laying mines once again, but this time, it's different. The stakes feel higher than ever before. Rumors swirl among the crew, whispers of a major offensive in the coming weeks. If we can keep the Axis forces from reaching key positions in the Mediterranean, we might just have a chance at turning the tide. Captain Thompson is a man of few words, but I can tell he's feeling the pressure. As we lowered the last mine into the water, I caught a glimpse of his face. His brow furrowed, as if wondering if our efforts would be enough. There's something to be said for the quiet confidence of men like him. Seasoned veterans who understand that their job, though often behind the scenes, is just as critical as any grand battle. We've laid more than 400 mines in the past week alone. Each mine represents more than just an obstacle for the enemy. It's a message that we're still here, still fighting, and that we will not give up our seas without a fight. Admiralty Report. HMS Peacock, Mediterranean Sea, 1943. Royal Navy Admiralty Official Report. Subject: Successful minefield in the Eastern Mediterranean. Today's mission, conducted by HMS Peacock, has proven highly effective. The ship successfully laid a series of mines just outside a known Axis shipping lane. Intelligence has confirmed that an Axis supply ship was destroyed by one of these mines within hours of deployment. The operation was executed under difficult conditions. The crew performed admirably, and the minefield should provide a significant deterrent to Axis naval movements in this region. The strategic importance of this operation cannot be overstated, as it denies the enemy easy access to crucial resources in the Mediterranean. Diary entry: HMS Halcyon, May 30th, 1945. We've seen it all. The war is almost over, but it's been a long, grueling journey. The HMS Halcyon and her sister ships were instrumental in changing the tide of the conflict. I often think back to the day we laid our first minefield in the Channel, not knowing what would come of it. Now, after years of continuous service, I can say that every mission was worth it. I remember the crew, the camaraderie, the shared risks. We weren't just laying mines. We were laying down the foundation for peace, one mine at a time. And as the war comes to a close, I can look back with pride, knowing we did our part in the battle for Britain's survival. Reminiscence. The night of the Italian convoy. The nights in the Mediterranean can be hauntingly beautiful, but there's nothing pretty about warfare. One night, as we were returning from a mine-laying mission off the coast of Sicily, we spotted something that chilled my bones. A large Italian convoy, just beyond the horizon. Their ships were moving in a tight formation, probably unaware of the minefield we had laid just days earlier. Our ship's radar officer, Lieutenant Evans, had detected the convoy just before they could alter course. The captain made the decision to shadow them from a safe distance. We had no immediate plans to engage, but we knew the convoy's fate was already sealed. Hours passed as we followed the convoy, barely a whisper in the night. The anticipation was unbearable. Finally, the first of their ships struck one of our mines. The explosion illuminated the darkness, followed by the sound of crumbling steel and the screams of men fighting for survival. It was a horrible thing to witness, and yet, in that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. The mission had been a success, and the risk of Axis dominance in the Mediterranean had been reduced, if only temporarily. Admiralty Report. HMS Halcyon, September 10th, 1943. Royal Navy Admiralty Official Report. Subject: Successful neutralization of Italian convoy in the Mediterranean. Following the successful laying of a minefield near the Italian coastline, a significant action was observed. An Italian convoy, attempting to navigate through this area, was severely disrupted by the detonation of multiple mines. One of the lead vessels, an Italian destroyer, was confirmed to have been destroyed in the explosion, while several other vessels sustained significant damage. It is important to note that the strategic impact of this event is far-reaching. The convoy was transporting critical supplies to Axis forces in North Africa, and its destruction has effectively delayed enemy reinforcements for several weeks. The actions of HMS Halcyon and its crew should be commended for their professionalism and effectiveness in this critical mission. Diary entry, December 5, 1944. HMS Halcyon, English Channel. The war is shifting. The Allies are making advances on all fronts, and the Axis forces are retreating. I've seen the faces of men I've known for years grow older, wearier, yet still full of resolve. We've laid mines in almost every corner of the seas, somewhere between the icy waters of the North Sea and the warm waves of the Mediterranean. Today, I look out over the English Channel once more, and it's hard to imagine that only a few years ago, it was a place of constant fear. The enemy could have struck at any moment, and yet we managed to hold them at bay with little more than determination and a few hundred tons of metal. Today, we're laying our final minefield of the war. It's an odd feeling. There are no great celebrations, just quiet anticipation. The world is changing, and so is the role of the Royal Navy. We had done our part. Our mines have crippled the enemy, protected the home front, and disrupted countless supply chains. I have no doubt that, years from now, the history books will remember our work as one of the unsung victories of the war. Reminiscence, the last minefield. The day we laid the last minefield remains clear in my mind. It wasn't a grand battle. There were no explosions, no dramatic confrontations. It was simply the end of an era in which minelayers, like HMS Halcyon, had played a key role in the battle for control of the seas. As we finished the deployment and turned toward port, there was a sense of finality. The work we had done had helped tip the scales in favor of the Allies. Now, all we could do was wait and see what the final chapter of the war would bring. I can still remember the final report from the Admiralty that day. Admiralty Report, HMS Halcyon, May 8, 1945. Royal Navy Admiralty, Post-Victory Report. Subject: the role of minelayers in the Allied victory. As the war in Europe draws to a close, it is important to reflect on the significant contributions of the Royal Navy's minelayers. Throughout the conflict, these ships have successfully laid countless mines in strategic locations, disrupting enemy naval operations and hindering Axis supply chains. The success of HMS Halcyon and its sister ships in the Mediterranean, English Channel, and beyond cannot be overstated. They were a silent but formidable force in the Allied victory, and their contribution will forever be remembered in the annals of naval history. The last minefield laid by HMS Halcyon marked the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. The ship and its crew will go down in history as one of the unsung heroes of the war, and their efforts ensured that the Royal Navy maintained control over vital maritime routes during a time of unprecedented global conflict. Diary entry, May 9, 1945. HMS Halcyon, Portsmouth Harbor. The war is over. The celebrations are starting, but we're not part of the parade. We've done our job. We did it quietly, without fanfare or glory. I'll never forget the faces of the men I sailed with. Their courage, their dedication, and their willingness to lay it all on the line for something greater than themselves. We've seen the worst of it, but we've also seen what it takes to overcome the odds. As I stand on the deck of HMS Halcyon, watching the flags fly high, I can't help but think back to all those mines we laid, all the hours we spent on watch, all the sacrifices. It wasn't just the victory of the Royal Navy. It was the victory of the unsung heroes, the men who quietly, steadily, and resolutely made the seas safer, one mine at a time. And that, I suppose, is how we'll be remembered, not for the explosions, not for the great naval battles, but for the role we played in shaping the outcome of the war one silent minefield at a time. The final report. The legacy of the mine layers. Royal Navy Admiralty Post-War Report. Subject: the impact of mine layers on naval warfare during World War II. The contribution of the Royal Navy's mine layers during World War II was profound. Through the careful laying of mines, the Navy created barriers that effectively denied enemy access to strategic ports and shipping lanes. The Halcyon and Admiralty classes were instrumental in these efforts, with each ship laying hundreds of mines that played a key role in disrupting Axis naval operations. The HMS Halcyon, in particular, earned a place in history as one of the most successful mine layers of the war. In total, the Royal Navy's mine layers were responsible for creating minefields that protected Britain's shores, hindered enemy supply lines, and helped secure vital victories in the Mediterranean and the Far East. The legacy of these ships is not just one of strategic importance, but of bravery, innovation, and the indomitable spirit of those who sailed them. Their story will be remembered as one of the great untold chapters of naval warfare. Heroic Days. The story of those who manned the mine layers during World War II is one of quiet yet resolute courage. While the world focused on the grand battles, the air raids, and the naval clashes, the men aboard ships like HMS Halcyon were silently, day by day, shaping the course of the war in their own way. Their efforts might not have made the front-page headlines, but without them, the strategies of the war would have been far less effective. The mine layers were not just laying mines. They were creating barriers to enemy progress, cutting off supply routes, and denying the Axis forces vital access to key areas. Their work was critical to maintaining control of the seas, ensuring that enemy ships were constantly at risk, always in the shadow of a minefield they couldn't see. The fact that these ships ventured out in the dead of night, often without fanfare or recognition, only to leave behind a trail of destruction, speaks volumes about their bravery. It's a testament to the heroism of sailors who accepted that their role might go unnoticed but understood its significance in the broader war effort. Every mine they deployed, each carefully calculated drop into the depths of the ocean, was a calculated risk that could alter the course of a naval battle, or even the entire war. And there's something particularly poignant about the final days. As the Allies closed in on victory, the mine layers' mission was far from over. Even after the news of Germany's surrender, there were still mines to be laid in the English Channel and the Mediterranean. It was a strange paradox. Victory was in sight, yet the job wasn't complete. For these men, the end of the war didn't mean the end of their responsibility. It meant one final duty. The story of the Royal Navy mine layers is, in a way, the story of the unsung heroes of war. Those who fought not with guns and bombs, but with the quiet persistence of their duty, knowing that the impact of their work would be felt long after they sailed into port. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za and support this meaningful dyslexic initiative. Thank you for watching.